And Jesus sat down upon the Mount of Olives. His disciples came to him privately, saying, "Tell us, when shall these things be? And what shall be the sign of thy coming? And the end of the world? What should we be looking for, Lord? What will be the signs? What will be the signs of thy coming?"
harassing another U.S. warship similar to this encounter that was caught on camera.
No response. Weapons uncovered. Man conducting routine security patrol.
This time, one of the Iranian boats stopping less than 100 yards in front of it, forcing a patrol ship to change directions, avoiding a crash. Just weeks ago, these 4 Iranian boats coming within 300 yards of a U.S. ship. And then, one day later, 2 similar incidents. One forcing a U.S. Navy boat to fire 3 warning shots into the water. Former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, John Bolton, says Iran could be training for war.
This is both dangerous and reckless on their part. It's training for the kinds of runs they would make against U.S. naval vessels if they ever did want to engage in hostility. It's a propaganda exercise, to say the least. But I think the bigger picture is this. This is a substantial piece of evidence that the hypothesis that the Obama administration pursued through the nuclear deal is incorrect.
Confrontations between the U.S. and Iran in international waters have more than doubled.
That is information that basically there have been twice the number of incursions at sea between Iranian ships and the United States forces, that this is a dangerous escalation and that it happens after we signed this deal, which was supposed to de-escalate those sorts of things. But it's actually doubled.
Yeah. Well, speaking of things the media doesn't cover, I mean, we've seen in the past few weeks pretty intensive coverage of 2 specific incidents where small Iranian boats capable of carrying torpedoes and laying mines, by the way, approached American destroyers and other warships. But what this new report, recharacterizing some data from over the past year, indicates is that this level of threatening, provocative, dangerous incident is really much higher than was publicly known before. And that is significant. It's significant particularly because it shows that post the nuclear deal in the summer of 2015, not only did Iran's behavior internationally not get better, having been able to take advantage of the deal, it's gotten worse. And it's gotten worse on a whole range of issues, continuing their ballistic missile testing, provocative behavior and support for terrorism in the Middle East, I think continued progress on their nuclear program, all of which gives the lie to the fundamental basis for the deal, which was not simply to resolve Iran's nuclear weapons threat, but to change their behavior more broadly, to bring them into the international community. It is, as of the data we have, as of this moment, a resounding failure on every count.
핵시험장에서 새로 연구 제작한 핵탄두의 위력 판정을 위한 핵폭발 시험을 단행하였다. 이번 시험에서 방사성 물질 노출 현상이 전혀 없었고 주위 생태 환경에 그 어떤 부정적 영향도 주지 않았다는 것이
We've got some late-breaking news tonight that's just come to us since we've been on the air this hour. There are indications tonight that North Korea has conducted an underground nuclear test. South Korean officials say they detected a tremor emanating from North Korea, but they described it as an artificially caused tremor, meaning it was not caused by an earthquake. Usually that means a large explosion caused by a test. Corroborating that, the U.S. Geological Survey says that it has registered a 5.3 magnitude seismic event out of North Korea. But again, indications are that this is not a natural earthquake. This is a nuclear test. If confirmed, this would be North Korea's 5th nuclear test in total. And it, of course, will set off a whole new round of international recriminations and worries. Their last test was in January of this year. If this was a new one, this is going to be very big news over the next few days.
The North Koreans saying they've standardized a nuclear warhead. They can now miniaturize it, put it on a ballistic missile. Do you take them at their word?
Well, whether they've done it now or whether they'll do it next year or year after that, it's very clear this is a military testing program. They've had their setbacks. They don't seem to be particularly slowed down by the setbacks. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they've done that. I mean, the real question is not whether they've done it or not. It's what we are going to do about this. I mean, this is a very disturbing development. They're working on a ballistic missile program, including a submarine-launched missile. They've got clearly they've made progress on miniaturization, and before long, I think they're going to have a nuclear warhead on a missile. And I think we have to really look very carefully and see what we're going to do. Clearly, they don't care what we think. They don't care about our admonitions. They don't care about joining the international community. They certainly don't care about UN Security Council resolutions. They don't care what the Chinese think or what the U.S. thinks. So I think we've got a situation now where I'm not sure we need too much more evidence to make a decision here.
What would that decision be, though? Because clearly something needs to be done, but it always gets back to the point, well, what is that something?
Right. Well, I mean, I think there needs to be something more than sanctions. I think we need to sit down with the Chinese, and rather than say, look, China, you need to solve this, or have the Chinese say to us, look, you need to solve it, which they often do. I think we need to sit down and say, okay, together we need to solve this. And I think the solving part has to do with more than just sanctions or public admonitions. I think we have to be looking at the dimensions of their program and what direct means we can take to either slow it down or kill it.
Defense official tells Fox News a Russian jet buzzed a U.S. Navy spy plane today over the Black Sea being north of Turkey, south of Ukraine. This has happened before, where we've seen a Russian jet buzz a Navy destroyer a few months ago in the Baltic Sea. And of course, we've been reporting that Navy ships have been harassed by Iranian ships in the general region. This is the news today, though, that the Russian jet has buzzed a U.S. Navy spy plane. We don't know how close precisely, but it's described as dangerously close to the U.S. Navy P-8 Poseidon reconnaissance aircraft. This aircraft is mainly used for anti-submarine warfare. It was on a routine patrol in the Black Sea when this happened. And it's worth noting, as we talked about at the beginning of the show, that there's a lot of conversation today from different U.S. officials on national security. Our Secretary of Defense Ash Carter was talking about Russia earlier today at Oxford University. Again, earlier today, and we don't know exactly when this happened, but he had some choice words for Russia, saying they were trying to play by their own rules and making the situation in Syria more violent. So that was said today by, of course, our top official in the Defense Department. Then we have this news about the Russian jet buzzing one of our spy planes. So just something to keep in mind as we continue to look at national security as a major theme for the day.
Zika is spreading in South Florida, and the stakes are high. When pregnant women become infected with the virus, their babies can be born with devastating birth defects. That's why health authorities have sprayed a pesticide from airplanes to kill the mosquitoes that carry Zika. But there's concern that the chemical being sprayed, called Naled, may also be harmful to unborn babies.
It's essentially a neurotoxin and can result in unborn children in particular having neurodevelopmental problems.
The European Union has banned Naled insecticide. And in Puerto Rico, where Zika has been rampant, people have demonstrated against Naled, a type of organophosphate. The mayor of San Juan filed a lawsuit against the Centers for Disease Control to prevent spraying, saying there have been recent findings linking the presence of organophosphates and behavior problems in babies whose mothers were exposed to this type of chemical during their pregnancy. The CDC and the Environmental Protection Agency say Naled is safe and the best option for killing these mosquitoes.
afternoon after a leprosy scare in a local school district. Letters went home to parents saying 2 students at Indian Hill Elementary in Jurupa Valley might be sick with leprosy.
It concerns me considering I have a little daycare going on and the kids that I watch go to the same school.
Parents like Denise Blankenship nervously let their children return to class at Indian Hills Elementary School after learning of 2 unconfirmed cases of leprosy.
I hear that you don't know for like a year or 2 down the road if you have it or not.
Adolf Flores brought his grandchildren with face masks and noticed many parents kept their kids home.
But normally this place would be packed with kids.
I want you to take a second and think, when was the last time you washed your hands today? Well, you may be a little more conscious about that practice after hearing there's a new drug-resistant superbug right here in the U.S. Here to tell us how we can prevent the spread of superbugs is Caitlin Harms, an infection preventionist from Unity Point Health Meriter. Caitlin, thanks so much. And let's start with, what is a superbug? It's pretty scary to hear that term.
Sure. A superbug is just a term to describe an antibiotic-resistant bacteria, or a bacteria that has developed ways to survive against antibiotics.
Okay, and where are these superbugs coming from?
Every time someone takes antibiotics, sensitive bacteria are the first to be killed off. After that course, resistant bacteria can remain in that infection and be left alone to divide and multiply. So it's an example of survival of the fittest with bacteria.
So when I hear superbug and prescription, like not working on this, drug resistant, what's the best way to go about keeping this away from me and my family?
Sure, the best way to avoid resistance is wise use of antibiotics. So number 1, not overusing antibiotics. Recognizing that certain infections like viral things like colds, influenza cannot and should not be treated with antibiotics. And the second one is using the full course of antibiotics when they're prescribed. Even when you start to feel better, continue your entire course of antibiotics until it's done.
To an antibiotic can involve resistance to extremely high concentrations in a
Of the country. It was a jolting morning in parts of at least 7 states as an earthquake in Oklahoma rattled millions and caused at least some damage there. The quake was the latest and most powerful in a huge increase of earthquake activity in the region. Gotti Schwartz has that story.
Nearly a full minute of shaking in Oklahoma, a state now rivaling California as earthquake country. Nearly a full minute of shaking in Oklahoma, a state now rivaling California as earthquake country.
It was the biggest one I've ever felt.
Today, a 5.6 quake in the small town of Pawnee.
I gotta have you inspect the damage.
Emergency crews dousing fires while other areas saw 100-year-old stone facades come crashing down. And in grocery stores, aisle after aisle in shambles.
Right away, you could tell this was something different.
The quake fanning out across the country felt in Nebraska, Missouri, Iowa, Arkansas, Texas, and as far as Illinois and Colorado.
Crazy.
But more alarming than the shaking, an upward trend documented by the U.S. Geological Survey showing a spike in Oklahoma earthquakes. Before 2000, the Sooner State saw about 2 quakes a year larger than a 3.0. In 2011, the number up to 63. And last year, a staggering 890 quakes.
Rattling and shaking across Green Country as well as several other states after a record-tying 5.6 magnitude earthquake is recorded near Pawnee. We have the very latest for you tonight. A Pawnee man was injured when the chimney inside of his home collapsed on top of him. He is expected to be okay. Tonight, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation inspected bridges within 30 miles of the epicenter. Workers tell us they did not find any damage. This afternoon, the Oklahoma Corporation Commission said they will be shutting down all disposal wells inside of the Arbuckle Formation. That's a 725 square mile area near Pawnee. Fox 23's team of reporters have been bringing you live coverage of the damage since that earthquake rumbled just after 7 o'clock this morning. Our team coverage starts right now with Fox 23's Hector Mejia. He's live tonight in Pawnee with a look at the damage done at one local grocery store.
The store manager tells me the damage they estimate is in the couple of thousands of dollars, and that includes the damaged ceiling tiles, merchandise, even some of those holiday weekend sales they had to turn away this morning. These registers, though, they're back to normal, open for business.
Didn't just shake for a minute. It started and went, underneath our chairs and clear down the rest of the house.
After that scare Saturday morning, Sandra Brown went straight to White's Food Liner, but found it closed.
Where am I going to get bread, milk, and orange juice?
Employees had no option but to turn customers away while they cleaned up every single aisle. Canned goods.
Oh, we got a mess in this one, don't we?
Baking supplies, even the sign broke loose.
The whole building was swaying. I could see the signs up top moving back and forth, and then stuff just started caving off the shelves.
Lori Bento was setting up registers when that preliminary 5.6 earthquake shook up Pawnee.
There was no thoughts. I mean, all I could do was just stand there and hold on to the counter.
Besides seeing and hearing merchandise fall off the shelves like the soda bottle here, the two employees here also saw and heard debris falling from the ceiling, like these ceiling tiles, this insulation, even some lettering that came off their wall.
I said, is this the end? Is Jesus coming back?
People who don't even work here showed up to pitch in, even though they had their own earthquake mess to clean up at home.
We're a community, and that's just what we do.
I was ready to cry, so I was glad my husband was there.
Brown says it's the most terrifying experience yet.
Yes, I would say so, as far as fear from being hurt by something.
In your entire life?
Yeah, wow. And I'm over 70, let me tell you.
Arkansas will get its first look tomorrow at two proposals for new monuments outside the state capitol.
But these monuments fall on opposite ends of the spectrum. One is a statue of the Ten Commandments. The other is a monument from the Satanic Temple.
Our Grant Sloan joins us now live from our Branson Bureau tonight with this story. Grant.
Well, David and Jennifer, the two proposals stem from a bill passed by Arkansas lawmakers last year that would allow the Ten Commandments to be built on grounds there at the state capitol. Well, the Satanic Temple says its proposal for a statue should be allowed also, and it wants to sit right next to, more than 20 feet, of the Ten Commandments. The Satanic Temple's proposed statue for the Capitol lawn is expected to look something like this, called Baphomet. The group says the half-man, half-animal symbolizes the reconciliation of opposites, in this case, opposing religious views. As for the Ten Commandments, it's unknown what the monument might look like, but it's expected to weigh around 6,000 pounds, stand 6 feet tall, and be paid for by private donations. While seemingly the latest chapter in the battle over separation of church and state, most residents we spoke with in Harrison say they're not on board with the Satanic Temple's proposal.
It's debatable. I mean, everybody's got their choice, but I mean, if you can't go by the Ten Commandments, something wrong with you.
We are a godly nation. We are based upon Christianity. I think the Ten Commandments should be on there.
The sponsor of the bill to allow the Ten Commandments at the Capitol says the monument would signify the foundation of law in the country. But the Satanic Temple says only allowing the Christian display would give the appearance of the government endorsing a particular religion.
It's America. We have freedom of speech. We've fought for that, and I think that it's important that everyone is allowed to say what they think.
I'm all for the Ten Commandments, anywhere and everywhere. And you start putting other monuments up, where does it stop?
The buck may stop with the Arkansas Secretary of State, who's scheduled to review both proposals tomorrow. But, as has been the case in other states, the final decision could play out in the courtroom. Now, there has also been discussion of putting up a wall in between the two statues if both end up being approved. Now, again, the Secretary of State is expected to review both of those proposals tomorrow afternoon.
It's an issue of separation between church and state. O'Donnell High School has a painting of the Ten Commandments as well as a Bible verse in their newly built common area of the school.
But when students came to school this morning, both paintings were covered up after an anonymous complaint. KCBD News Channel 11's Presley Fowler joins us now to explain. Presley?
Well, Christine Abner, I spoke with O'Donnell ISD Superintendent Dr. Kathy Amonette. She says she received a letter from a group called the Freedom from Religion Foundation saying someone complained about the Ten Commandments and Scripture being painted on the school walls. This led to her covering up the paintings to avoid a lawsuit until a better solution is reached. But now this issue has created a movement throughout the entire school.
Be on your guard, stand firm in your faith, be courageous, be strong. 1 Corinthians 16:13, which meaning that we all just need to stand firm, you know. The whole school came together today.
O'Donnell High School junior Katie Grubin explains what she posted on Facebook following the Ten Commandments at her school being covered up. Just one of hundreds of posts from students sharing their reaction, which sparked a community-wide conversation.
It's one of the big things that O'Donnell's known for is for keeping their faith strong no matter what. And so we just decided that we were going to make it known that we wanted this as a big deal.
After receiving the letter from the Freedom from Religion Foundation, Superintendent Dr. Kathy Amonette covered the paintings this morning, first with black paper, until some students tore that down. Now the painting of the Ten Commandments is covered with an American flag.
I made the decision to cover it up until I make a more informed decision about what I should do, because I don't want to harm the district or cause any controversy or anything.
Junior Abby Franklin says the students appreciate the way Dr. Amonette has been transparent about this situation as she hosted a school assembly today after lunch.
She's been very calm and very loving towards all of us. The first thing she said is, I know you're all frustrated. I'm just as frustrated as you are.
But the students took that frustration and turned it into a movement.
Because of this, students have put verses on sticky notes and just around the hallways and stuff. So 2 verses and commandments they've been complaining about turned into 70 more verses.
I'm proud of my kids. I think that they have shown the kind of people that they are. They believe in the Ten Commandments and they want to stand up for it. And I'm proud of them for that.
Now it is a waiting game as they still don't know who initially complained.
I'm going to do some more investigation and get with the school leadership and then and the community and the students, and we will decide what we need to do to protect the school while also honoring them.
But Abby says she is not alone in hoping a solution will be reached soon.
This is something we believe in, and this is something we can't just ignore. Don't take away our faith. It's all we have. It's all we can live on anymore.
The Ten Commandments will remain covered up for the time being. We did reach out to the Freedom from Religion Foundation to find out more about the letter and have not heard back yet.
behind me is the skyline of Aleppo in Syria. A nationwide ceasefire came into force just an hour ago. It was brokered in marathon talks between Russia and the US last week. The Russian Defense Ministry says all agreed measures for a cessation of hostilities in Syria is in place. Well, let's get more on this by RT's Daniel Hawkins. He joins me live now. Daniel, hi there. It's a ceasefire that's been a long time in the making, and thus great hopes are placed on it lasting. Bring us up to spec with the actual details of it.
That's right, Ewan. It's been many weeks and months, some would say even years in the making, this fire. As you say, we're less than an hour into it, and it's due to last just over a week. So just one tiny step made into it so far, and so far all calm as far as we understand in Aleppo. Some of the nuts and bolts of this treaty, the Russian Defense Ministry has confirmed it will use aerial drones to monitor the maintenance of this ceasefire across the territory of Syria. The Russians and Americans will create a joint center to identify terrorist targets, separate them from moderate opposition. That was a key talking point of Kerry and Lavrov over the past few weeks, and then take action against them once they have identified those targets. Russia has made clear it expects the US to honor all agreements made with respect to this treaty. It's also called on opposition groups to refrain from taking military action against the Kurds. Various Kurdish groups, the YPG, etc., have been a key fighting force against Islamic State, both in Syria and in Iraq. Keeping them on side is a key factor here. Of course, not all terrorist groups are part of this treaty. ISIL, Jabhat al-Sham, formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, are excluded, and Russia is considering giving Damascus, informing Damascus of intended targets around Aleppo to enable them to target those terrorist groups which have been exempt from the treaty. It's not all rose-tinted, though. Russia has also expressed concern over some opposition groups refusing to cooperate already on the terms of this treaty. Some opposition groups, for example, have expressed annoyance, perhaps, that Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, as we said, formerly Jabhat al-Nusra, are exempt from this treaty. They've said this is something that may get in the way of peace proceedings, and they've demanded that similar, or rather what they perceive to be similar groups fighting on the side of the government, for example the Shiite militias, Hezbollah, etc., from Iran, from Iraq, are also banned. They've said they will not cooperate until that takes place. The Syrian Arab Army has already announced what they've described as a regime of calm on the whole Syrian territory. They relay that to the state broadcaster Surya for everybody to hear. But even so, opposition groups have demanded to know why the Syrian Air Force has not been restrained from attacking the territories they control across the whole of Syria. That could well prove to be a bone of contention. So as we said, just an hour into this treaty, there does seem to be a lot of organization behind it, a lot of planning certainly in place by both sides here, Russia and Washington. It's the first time Damascus has also been directly involved in the planning of such an event. But as we say, very early days yet, and a week to go until that joint operations center is fully operational. That will depend on whether all sides can adhere to these conditions. That remains to be seen over the coming hours and days.
Yes, so many parts, isn't there? That's RT's Daniel Hawkins bringing us right up to date. Well, another correspondent of RT's, Lizzie Phelan, is in the long-besieged city of Aleppo, where many of the locals were looking forward to the ceasefire coming into being. But years of war have left them hesitant to believe in any lasting peace.
Here on the ground in Aleppo, there's still widespread skepticism that it's actually going to work after so many failed efforts in the past to bring peace to cities like this one that has been so badly affected by almost 6 years of war. In fact, over the last few hours, we've heard that a government-held area in Aleppo of Bustan Kleb in the run-up to this ceasefire has been shelled by opposition-held territory. We've heard that one civilian has been killed and approximately 15 injured. So this really underpinning that there is still a widespread, a deep-seated mistrust between both the government and the opposition, that those opposing sides will abide by the terms of any truce. And those difficulties, that lack of clarity is largely contributing, as I said, to that widespread skepticism here on the ground in cities like Aleppo, that this ceasefire is finally going to work, which was expressed to us by 23-year-old Ala, who also told us of her hope that it will work, so future generations can be spared of the suffering that she's lived through over the last few years. The countdown for the cessation of hostilities to begin is almost up. Many people in Aleppo, after so many failed efforts, are very skeptical about whether it's actually going to work. 23-year-old Ala lives here on one of the old city's front lines. We've come to talk to her about what an end to the violence will mean for her. Ala, do you believe that this cessation of hostilities is genuinely going to work this time?
Every time we hear about a truce, the fighting just continues. We hope to have at least one peaceful night, but it is not happening. Of course, the ceasefire would be useful. At least we will be able to have a few days without bloodshed. Every morning we wake up to gunfire and the sound of shelling. It is terrifying. I have two brothers who are martyrs. One was 27 and the other 16. My sister's husband became a martyr. He was killed during Ramadan. Life is hard here, but we are staying for the sake of our homeland and the president and the martyrs. What else can we do? My hope is to live in a peaceful country where the next generation can study and have everything they need and not live as we are living.
For both of the parts, the Syrian government and representatives of the so-called Free Syrian Army have both said that they will respect the ceasefire agreement. However, the United States Vice President also expressed his skepticism that Russia is in fact going to be able to influence the Syrian government to ground its warplanes. However, it looks as though the greatest threat to this pause in the fighting is coming from one of the most powerful Islamist groups, Ahrar al-Sham, that has outright rejected the ceasefire agreement in a video statement. Previously, Russia tried to have Ahrar al-Sham blacklisted and placed on the United Nations Security Council list of terrorist organizations. However, that effort was blocked by the United States. So still a lack of clarity as to whether Russia and the United States in fact agree on what would constitute an acceptable opposition in Syria.
Well, for more in today's developments, let's bring in Chris Bambury, a political analyst. Chris, you're very welcome to the programme. A monumentous 7 days ahead for the country of Syria, isn't it? If the ceasefire holds, Russia, the US, going to come together to eradicate Islamist groups. That's the plan. Is this finally the solution, do you believe, that Syria needs?
Well, Syria desperately needs a ceasefire, and a political agreement is necessary to that. I have to say, on the one side, America and Russia are coming together with the support of the Assad government, with the support of Iran, means, I think, on that side, the ceasefire will be a success. I think the problems come, as your correspondents have said, on the other. First of all, there are other powers intervening into the region. Turkey, Saudi Arabia in particular, who've armed and financed some of these groups, particularly the former al-Nusra Front, and are using many of those as their satraps. Will they be prepared to break their links? The Turks are already in northern Syria, engaged in operations against the YDP, the Kurdish organisation. Is that going to continue? And I think the whole question, as your correspondent says, is how much traction does the former al-Nusra Front have over the other elements of the FSA? And on past performance, it has quite a lot of traction. We have seen hemorrhaging of so-called moderate groups. There are fighters joining on the Nusra Front. We've seen arms supplied by Americans going to that. So therefore, what's going to happen here? And the fact that the United States haven't agreed to identify al-Nusra Front as being a terrorist organisation is a question mark in this process, because this is an al-Qaeda-linked organisation. I mean, how much more proof do you that need? So I think on the one side, I'm confident the ceasefire can hold. On the other, I think there are real difficulties your correspondents have alluded to.
Since the deal was hammered out on Friday, there has, of course, been a lot of reaction to this, including from Germany's Foreign Affairs Minister, Frank-Walter Steinmeier. He questioned whether that the ceasefire will hold. We can take a listen to what he actually had to say together now.
There is no guarantee the ceasefire will hold, but we have at least a semi-realistic chance to bring help to the war-burdened people of Syria.